vehicle history reports. So, to pretty much everyone in this room, or really the automotive space as a whole, this tends to be a negative term. Doesn't matter if you're in sales, collision, or the insurance space. Pretty much one thing we can all agree on is that it tends to hold a negative connotation when that term is said. But why? I think in order to understand that, it's important to consider exactly what it is these reports are designed or at least marketed to do. And that's to protect a potential car buyer. However, in order to protect someone, you have to have something to protect it from. And that tends to be shifted to someone within the automotive space, be it a shady car salesman or a back alley body shop that did inferior work. So what you end up with are TV commercials that tell everyone in the world that a vehicle that's been involved in an accident or has damage is simply worth way less than one that hasn't. And that's pretty much the end of the story. But what if it wasn't the end of the story? As everyone in this room knows, there is a huge difference between a vehicle that's been repaired properly, using quality components, by a trained technician following proper procedures, and one that hasn't. And if indeed that car has been repaired properly, shouldn't the world know that too? But in order to get to where that is a possibility, I think it's important to understand where it is we are as it pertains to the collision industry and the vehicle history reporting space. The story was told to me that about a decade or so ago, a large MSO got together with one of these vehicle history reporting agencies and put together a program that would overtly share repair data. Now, apparently, one of the insurance companies affiliated with the MSO came to them and said, look, you can either share data with them or do work for us, but you can't do both. And that seems to be the line in the sand that was drawn and the stance the industry has taken, and that we're going to stonewall. We're simply not going to share any information. It appears that the vehicle history reporting agency said, well, okay, if you're not going to overtly share information with us, we're going to come up with some creative ways of gathering this information. Now, this creates one major problem with really two side effects that are pretty nasty. That major problem of stonewalling and then trying to gather information creatively creates a situation where the collision industry is effectively alienated from deciding if, how, or when this information is shared. And that creates the first side effect. That side effect is the shop ends up holding the bag. What do I mean by that? Well, Mrs. Jones comes in however many months later after repair, angry, because information privy only to that shop is now in essence public record. And in her mind, this can happen in only really one of two ways. Either the shop overtly shared this information without her permission or knowledge, or really the reality is that the shop has absolutely no idea how this information got where it got. Either is a terrible look for both the shop and the industry as a whole. And that leads to the second side effect here. Because of all this negativity, because of all the stonewalling and gathering information, it creates this loop of distrust and problems which make it difficult for any real solution or any solving to happen. So what we get here is, again, a vehicle history report inherently needs to blame someone or protect the public from someone, and that tends to be someone within the automotive industry creating negativity. The stance the industry has taken leads to creative measures of gathering this type of information. And at the end of the day, the shop ends up holding the bag in front of an angry customer. Right? So how can we make this better? Well, big vehicle history data will tell you, well, you know what? Just give us all your information. That way we don't have to get creative. And we promise, wink, wink, that we're going to do the best thing for everybody involved. Well, I've been in this space for about a decade, and unfortunately, I can tell you that a lot of the distrust that exists is very well warranted. Big data will agree to one thing. They will eventually do another. And if you don't like it, they will openly dare you to challenge the proverbial 800-pound gorilla. So if that's not the solution, what is? Well, I believe the solution lies in really two facets or two phases. As my friends in the data and security committee are working hard to do, I think it's important to identify how this data is being collected creatively and work to try and limit or stem the flow of this data. Now, this is a tremendous challenge. It's something that all industries, not just the collision industry, face. And a lot of it has to do with the surprisingly antiquated way that data is shared. In many cases, for many reasons, mostly due to cost, the center doesn't necessarily have the ability to aggregate data per a particular vendor. So what tends to happen is a bunch of information is kind of just shoved out there, accepted by the vendor, and it's up to them to decide which pieces are pertinent to them. That leaves a whole bunch of extra data, kind of scrap data out to the side, where an interested party could happen upon it. The second thing I believe is important in order to help mitigate these problems is to create a arm's length conduit that enables the industry to share information that it does control. I stress arm's length because I mentioned to you before, 800-pound gorilla tends to take any advantage that they can from their size, and they will eventually try to leverage some facet of that. So having an arm's length or insulation really, I think, is important for both the shops and the industry as a whole. So, as you mentioned, we at Condition Now believe we've come up with just this conduit. We've created a mobile platform that enables the shop, if and when they and their customer decide it's relevant, to share only specific pieces of data designed to put a positive spin on the actual vehicle history report. Okay? So, as a whole, I think one of the two main points here are, first, we need to limit the information that is not within the control of the industry, and then make readily available information that we want. I don't really believe it's possible to stop the folks that are out there. I mean, that's really their main focus. But if we can make it easier to take what we want to give them, I believe we can turn this guy, who will stop at nothing, using all his power and influence to search out data, into this guy who's happy and content with the data that we want to provide to them, that ultimately is in the best interest of the consumer first, the shop, the industry, and really the gorilla. My name is Tom Allen. Thank you very much for your information.